Hi, my name is Shelley Christensen, and today we'll be talking about including adults with disabilities in congregational life. This presentation will provide ideas for you to help you support engagement of adults with disabilities in your congregation. Our purpose in this presentation is to teach congregations how to work with adults with disabilities, and we'll be looking at how to create opportunities for meaningful participation. Our goal is to provide you, as congregational leaders and congregants, ways to support adults who have disabilities within congregational life. How do we keep people involved who were involved in the past and have had an active synagogue life, but may have had an incident or an accident with something that causes a disability? And how do we keep them engaged now? This is Paula and her husband Norm. Paula has always led an active life. She and her husband Norm have one child, and she was employed as a school psychologist for many years. Paula has volunteered on several committees at her synagogue, and she did that while she was working full-time. She also attended Shabbat services regularly and really found a home in her congregation, a place that she felt she belonged. While in her late 20s, Paula sustained a spinal cord injury, and that caused a lot of adjustments to be made in her life. She now had to use a wheelchair as she could no longer walk. What was important to her was her job as a school psychologist, her role as wife and mother, and certainly her involvement in her synagogue. When she got to the synagogue, the congregants would hold the doors for her because there were no automatic door openers at that time. There was always somebody there to open the door for her, and that really helped her feel welcome. There was also someone there to help push her wheelchair, which was a manual chair, up the steep slope of a ramp that led to the sanctuary. So with help from her congregation, with support from her congregation, she was able to resume her Jewish life as well. Paula took over chairing the Synagogue Inclusion Committee during this time. That was after she also chaired several other committees. She was very involved in the leadership of the congregation. Paula's strengths were leadership. Over time, Paula's physical health declined. She was hospitalized and then placed in a rehabilitation facility to adapt to her decreased physical abilities. When it came time for the Inclusion Committee to meet at a regularly scheduled date, the members called Paula in the rehabilitation facility and asked if they could meet there so that she could chair the meeting. That was an accommodation that they made. That made Paula know that she was still a valued member of the synagogue, and that was very important to her. Paula was recently recognized by her congregation with a special award given to somebody who has volunteered for a long period of time. She said that it made her feel so valued and so important, and most importantly, she said she knew that she didn't get the award out of someone saying, "Look at that woman in the wheelchair. Isn't she brave? Isn't she courageous?" Paula got the award because she deserved the award, because with the support of her congregation, she was actively involved. So the question is, how do we keep somebody involved in synagogue life when an accident, a brain injury, a stroke, a debilitating disease, an onset of a disease such as MS, or something like that that can decrease one's balance or energy or cognition? How do we show them that they are important and that who they are hasn't been diminished in the eyes of the congregation, and make it possible for them to participate, even if how they participate may be different than it was? How do we continue to support them so that they can use their gifts, treat them with respect, and let them know that they are valued? As we age, not coincidentally, the chance of developing a disability increases. This could affect all of us at some point. So let's take a look at some ideas. When someone comes back after an injury or after an absence, welcome them back. I know that it's hard sometimes because we don't always know what to say. We don't want to say the wrong thing and we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. But I think it's more hurtful to ignore them or to just pass them by and say hello and keep walking. Treat them as you did before. Conversation is really important. That helps to ease people back into that pattern of a relationship. So engaging somebody in conversation and finding common interests or talking about things from the past that were common interests is very helpful too. Don't assume that because someone uses a wheelchair, they may need your help. That's not the case. But you can ask people if they'd like your help, and they can say yes or no. That really respects and honors their decision to have control over their choices. Sit with someone. Sit with them at services or at adult education class or Torah study. If you're leading Torah study, ask them what they need. Is it a large print prayer book? Someone to put Post-it notes on the page so that it's easier for them to turn the pages? How about removing a chair next to you so that someone who uses a wheelchair can sit next to you? These are just a few things that you can do if someone indicates that's what he or she wants. Be patient. Communication ability may have changed, but that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have something important to say. If you don't understand what someone says, ask them. Please repeat what you said. I didn't understand you. People also tend to know if somebody is pretending to understand. So be authentic with that and just say, I don't understand. If you notice that there's someone you haven't seen for a while, call them, visit them. Let them know that you're thinking about them. Knowing that someone is thinking about us when we haven't been present for a while helps to ease that sense of isolation. That's so common when people are not able to participate or be in congregational life. And most importantly, as things have probably changed or possibly changed, find out what's important to them in terms of their involvement in synagogue life. Let's talk for a moment about accessibility. Many Jewish grandparents and great-grandparents dream of participating in their grandchildren's B'nai Mitzvah. For many families, the honor of passing the Torah and being called for an Aliyah are especially meaningful and very important to them. For the honor of passing the Torah scroll from generation to generation, that can be accomplished when a grandparent or family member is unable to stand or ascend the bima. Bring the Torah to the family member before you pass it to the parents or to the next generation. Or assemble the family standing around the grandparent or the person who's not able to ascend the bima and pass the Torah there. If an older adult is unable to navigate the steps to the bima, consider where they would recite the Torah blessing when they're called for an Aliyah. Is there a small reading desk placed in front of them? What would you do in order to include them? These are important things to think about. But rather than try and come up with a solution on your own, talk with the family and find out what they're comfortable doing. That's a very important thing, because including that grandparent or that great-grandparent is paramount to having them walk up the stairs, perhaps risk an accident or being unable to get up there and have this wonderful family moment. I'm going to shift gears now to talk about including the occasional visitor. Occasional visitors are people who come to services once a year for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or they may come to an adult education program, or they may find something compelling or some reason for them to want to be at the synagogue, but they don't come very often, and therefore they're not known very well. I always think of these individuals as offering them an opportunity to really find their points of entry into congregational life. In other words, there are many activities that go on in a congregation, and each one of them is a door that opens into something that could be very meaningful, that someone wants to have in their lives. Well, we're not going to know which point of entry or which door to open or know where someone wants to go unless we talk to that person, unless we overcome our reticence about approaching somebody new or a fear of saying the wrong thing. Most important is welcoming someone. And always think about what's important to someone in their participation. So think of someone who comes to services and sits alone. They may have been dropped off by a family member, a taxi cab, or even a support staff person, and they really don't have much contact with the synagogue. What can you do to engage them? First of all, approach them, let them know they're welcome. Also, let them know that you recognize them, that you've seen them there before. Ask them if they have any questions about the synagogue. Sit with them. Get to know them. Tell them that you'd love to meet them one-to-one. And then that makes it possible to have another contact with them. Now, many people want to choose where they meet. Some people are fine coming to the synagogue to have a meeting with you, to have that one-on-one meeting with you. But others might want to meet at their home. They might want to meet at a coffee shop after work. Transportation, again, can be a concern in terms of how people get to where they're going to meet with you. Learn when you talk to them what's important to them. Have a conversation with them. What brings you to synagogue? What holds you back from attending more? Let's talk about ways that we can work together so that you can participate in the ways that you want to. Let's discover that together, and let's work on that together. For someone who is only occasionally involved, that makes a big difference, and it helps create opportunities for further involvement. Because the truth is, none of us really know what someone has to offer, what gifts a person has, what strengths a person has. There could be somebody who walks into your sanctuary or comes into your sanctuary or shows up at an adult education program who's very talented in some ways and may have a gift to share, and how wonderful to be able to open a door so that they can feel that they're contributing to something important. Finally, we're going to look at welcoming and including the stranger. The people who don't come, these are the people who aren't there because they don't know if there's access. They're afraid of coming and being alone. They may have tried to contact the synagogue and may have gotten a rude reception, or or maybe they left a message and they weren't called back. We don't really know what keeps someone away. Maybe these are people who come once a year to a special service that you have for people with disabilities. Or maybe they come with family members, but they only come once a year, or rarely, or at all. Let's talk about welcoming and including people who are new to us, who we've never seen before. And perhaps these are folks who are trying to belong or trying to participate in the synagogue, and maybe they're just calling for information, or maybe they are looking at a website, and they're just not sure if there's going to be access for them. They're not sure from that information how they'll feel, if they will feel comfortable. And people have their own reactions to things and to how they would feel. And a lot of people have really not participated much in synagogue life. But for some reason, known to them, they want to belong or they want to participate, or something is bringing them back to synagogue life. I'd like to introduce you to Sharon. Now, Sharon is someone who really wanted to join a synagogue, but for the reasons that I just mentioned, she wasn't sure where she would find her synagogue home. And it took a long time for Sharon to find a place. It took years for her to find a place where she would finally feel welcome. Sharon agreed to meet with the rabbi. She called the rabbi of a synagogue that she really had her eye on. She wanted to join this synagogue partly because they were moving into a new building and she knew that it would be accessible, but also because it exemplified her own values and the way that she grew up in Judaism. And she wanted to find that again for herself as an adult. And so Sharon met with the rabbi, and she really experienced a feeling of just being like everyone else in that meeting. He asked her lots of questions. She answered them. He listened to her. He listened to her responses. He didn't assume anything about Sharon. And the sense that he got was that Sharon really wanted to be involved in a synagogue and that she had a lot to offer. Once she started coming to services, people started to recognize her. And people started to know her, and they were curious. Who is this woman here? And in the beginning, they may have just seen Sharon's wheelchair. They may have just seen her disability. But as they saw her participating in services and they connected with her and they maybe said Shabbat Shalom to her, eventually people started to really engage with her and found out that she had so much to say. And she had so much to offer. And she had a rich Jewish life growing up. And now she was able to have that again in her life as an adult. Now she is very involved in her synagogue. What was important to Sharon? Nobody knew until they asked her, and they learned that what was important to Sharon was to belong, to be part of the congregation. What was important to Sharon was to have a bat mitzvah ceremony, something she wasn't able to do when she was 13. What was important to Sharon was taking on leadership roles in the synagogue, again, because she had so much to give and so much to offer. These were the kinds of things that for all those years she wasn't able to do until she found a synagogue that opened up its doors to her and let her know that she was important. And that's what can happen when we open our doors, when we find points of entry with people, when we help them engage as adults. I want to share several thoughts with you before we end today. And the first thing that people ask me is, who is responsible for this? Who's responsible for doing the things that we've talked about today? And my answer is always, everyone is responsible. Everybody has a chance to connect with other people. Everybody has a chance to put a smile on their face, wish a Shabbat Shalom, to welcome people. That's really important. And within congregational life, certainly there are lots of aspects where people come in and they participate. But I think especially for adults, the first place they might go is to services. And what do we do at services? We welcome people. We extend a Shabbat Shalom, for example. We're all there to welcome the Sabbath. And that commonality is a very, very powerful tool to help us connect with someone, to talk to someone, to engage with someone. Some of the basic things that people who have disabilities have told me: treat them like everyone else. Don't think of them as the other or the person in the chair. Think of them as the person who has a name, the person who's also Jewish, the person who may have similar interests to me. Support adults by engaging with them and having those conversations. Ask people what they did when they were growing up for the holidays. Ask them what their favorite holiday is. Tell them what your favorite holiday is. You really are interested in just having that conversation, exchanging information with people. It's a great way to start a friendship. It's a great way to find out what people are interested in. And it's something that we all do regardless of whether or not we have a disability. Sometimes we tend to think that people who don't use spoken language or people whose language is difficult to understand, that they don't have much to say, and nothing could be further from the truth. So it's important not to ignore someone. It's important to have a conversation, to listen, especially to listen. And a lot of times people who don't communicate verbally can indicate what they want, what's important to them, and what they need. So that's been a barrier for a long time, but it's time to overcome that as well, so that people can live meaningful Jewish lives. when we start looking at everything through the lens of inclusion, sometimes we get sidetracked into thinking that we have to have everything in place before someone with a disability can participate. And we start planning without really knowing what someone needs or what is important to someone. So I think it's very important for us to take ourselves out of the mode of we have to get everything done, and rather focus on the human relationships as we're welcoming adults with disabilities. Focus on the relationships, and through that process, building a connection, through that we find out what someone needs in order to participate. I think a common assumption is to say that we have to have sign language interpreters for our services. Yet, not everyone who is deaf or hard of hearing uses sign language interpretation, and so we need to find out how they communicate and what their preference is. That may mean we don't have a sign language interpreter. That may mean we use something else, another form of communication. But we really don't know that until we learn more about someone. We're not there in our role as synagogue leaders and as congregants to decide for someone else what activities they can or will do. When we do that, we're actually trying to take control of someone else's life, and we don't have to do that. People with disabilities get to exert positive control over their own lives. By sitting down and having a conversation with them, you will learn so much more about what synagogue membership means to them. Finally, I just want to recap some of the things we talked about today, and also to help understand that whatever is available for the congregation, any member of the congregation, there are ways to make those things available for people who may have accessibility issues or different ways that we don't think about, but we should be thinking about in order for them to participate. And here's just a few of them. Look at the social opportunities in your congregation. Social engagement is very, very important. Social isolation is very difficult for so many people. Social opportunities can include membership in things like Women of Reform Judaism or Men of Reform Judaism. It can include making sure that people know that they are welcome at the annual meeting or at the fundraiser or at special speakers. And sometimes that means making a phone call or getting in touch with them. One of the things that people want to know is, we're taking a congregational trip to Israel. Can somebody who uses a wheelchair be able to go? Can somebody who has mobility issues be able to go with the congregation, or should they take a separate trip? And the people that I've spoken with who have gone on congregational trips, people who have disabilities, always say they're so glad they went with their congregation, because that's where their family is. That's where their heart and soul is the rest of the year. And taking a trip to Israel with people that they know or people from their congregation is a very tremendous experience. It's a growth experience for them, and it's a great experience for everybody who goes with them. It really is making sure that all people have those opportunities for participation, and that we're able to provide accommodations that are necessary in order for someone to enjoy that trip just like everyone else. Help someone transform their childhood memories into practice. Someone who's read Torah as a bar bat mitzvah and has that experience may want to do that again. Maybe they've been out of contact or out of touch with being able to do that for a long time and need to learn again. These are just examples. Whatever is offered to others in the congregation, opportunities for study, opportunities for leadership, members of the board, so many different things. But remember, people with disabilities get to speak. They have to participate in things that involve them. So it's very important to look at the culture of your congregation and ask yourself, does our congregation support us making sure that we have relationships with people with disabilities? And that's really where you start. Let's talk about disability etiquette as it's known. These are tips and things that you can find certainly by doing a Google search, but I wanted to talk about some of the ones that are most obvious and common things that many of us do when we speak with somebody with a disability. And one of the first things is that when you are encountering somebody, meeting somebody for the first time who may have an interpreter with them, or they may have a family member with them, or an aide, or somebody like that, make sure you talk directly to the person and not to the interpreter. You're not having a conversation with that person, you're having a conversation with the individual. And even when you're speaking with somebody who doesn't use spoken language, sit down with them and talk with them. And if they can't answer you, if they're not able to answer you, they certainly have a way of communicating with someone who's close to them, who may be there with them, who will then fill you in. So have the conversation with the individual. Another aspect of this is when we meet somebody who uses a wheelchair. And the wheelchair is really considered to be an extension of someone's personal space. So resist the temptation, if you will, to put your hands on the wheelchair, on the arm of the chair. A good way to have a conversation with somebody who uses a wheelchair is to pull up a chair as well and sit and look at them and talk to them on the same level. A lot of times I'll see people who are talking to somebody who may be using a wheelchair or a cane or some other mobility device, and that they'll yell at them or they'll talk loudly to them. And I always like to remind people that there's no need to do that because somebody has a disability. Just speak in a level tone. If somebody happens to be hard of hearing, note that if they're wearing a hearing aid, and also speak in carefully modulated tones. In the synagogue, make sure that you have identified spots where the lighting is really good, so that if somebody comes in and needs to have better lighting or large print prayer books or some way to help them see, make sure that they're able to sit where there's good lighting. You want to share that with the ushers as well. Also make sure the ushers know where the large print prayer books are and large print materials so that they are able to access those right away. If you have an assistive listening system that requires batteries in a personal hearing device that will help someone be able to capture what's being said at the service or at the event, make sure that the batteries are working and that the ushers know exactly where to find them. When you meet somebody with a disability, it's completely appropriate to shake hands with them. It's completely appropriate to have a conversation with them like you'd have with anybody else with common interests. Just to remember that you're meeting a new person, or you're having a conversation with somebody that you maybe have never spoken with before. Just be authentic, be yourself. Treat adults as adults. Address people by their names. And if somebody is negotiating their surroundings, you don't have to offer to help them unless they ask for help. And when people are learning new surroundings or want to know where to find the accessible restroom or where the rabbi's study is, you can tell them, you can show them, but let them navigate their space. And if they need your help, then you're there to offer that. If you're talking to somebody who has low vision or is blind, make sure that you let them know when you are leaving the room so that they don't continue to have a conversation. You might want to end that particular conversation with them. If you're in a classroom or teaching a class or having a meeting and you want to write something on the board, be sure that when you speak, you're still facing the group that you're addressing. Inclusion isn't one size fits all. Inclusion is one step at a time. Inclusion is one person at a time. When we break it down that way, it seems a lot more manageable than when we look at the whole of inclusion, one step and one person at a time.